Good morning, everyone. I am going to start with this topic, mosaic evolution, which refers to the phenomena where different biological and anatomical traits they evolve at different rates within a lineage. So the earlier traditional belief, it believed that if a species is being transitioned to another species, if it is evolving, then all the biological characteristics they evolve at the same time. So the traditional belief, the traditional view, it believed in uniform model of evolution. So let's take example of Homo erectus being evolving into Homo sapiens. So the traditional belief, it held that all the biological and anatomical characteristics such as dentition, skull shape and size, cranial capacity, the osteoskeletal system, then the limbic structure, the pelvis, the sagittal crest, the neurotransmission, all of them they evolve simultaneously into Homo sapiens. But when the transitional fossils were found, this belief was upended, this belief was shattered, and it gave way to mosaic evolution. So this dynamic and branching model of development, it says that the natural selection or the environmental pressure they act on individual traits, and different biological traits they evolve at different times in a particular species. So mosaic evolution refers to the non-uniform rate of evolutionary change. Again, the thing is same, that if evolution is happening, which is transition of a particular species from those with a better characteristic. Better characteristic here means those characteristics that help that particular species to survive the onslaught of time. So this model of evolution, mosaic evolution, it refers that the evolutionary change they are non-uniform, they are unsynchronous, and it refers to non-uniform rate of evolutionary change in different biological traits. So the talk is about biological traits within a species. And this concept also emphasizes that selective pressures they act on individual traits rather than entire organism. So earlier it was believed that selective pressures, natural selection, they act on entire organism. So um, the talks of the focus on individual traits, it wasn't given its due place, because again it was believed that if environment is acting on a certain species and if it is evolving, then all the biological characteristics they will evolve simultaneously. But again, we are talking about mosaic evolution, which has another take on evolution. So now when selective pressure, when natural selection acts on individual traits, so any organisms, the fossil of which we may be seeing by the archaeological discovery, it will exhibit a mixture of ancestral and derived characteristics. Then the evolutionary pressures such as environmental changes, predation, dietary they all influence specific traits independently. Please pay attention to this word, that all the environmental pressure, the pressures of natural selection, they will act on individual traits in an independent manner. So meaning of which is, example लेते हैं, Australopithecus, so primate stock से they became the first species of hominin stock, that is Australopithecus. Now Australopithecus, they had this bipedal locomotion, the characteristic that distinguish hominins from primates and other hominids. So this bipedal locomotion, which means to walk on two. Ab this particular transition or this evolution of this biological trait, it was due to the environmental pressure. क्योंकि पिछले वीडियो में we have seen that Australopithecus का जो time था, it was a transition from glacial to interglacial period. So glacial period means the most of the earth was covered with snow, thousands of kilometers of kilometer thick snow. Then interglacial period, it was characterized by warmth. So because of this warmth, the snow melted, फिर there were grasslands large grasslands हैं, तो फिर जो predation है वो भी था. फिर जो Australopithecus हैं, it survived in the intermingling period, the intermediate period from glacial to interglacial. So जो transitionary जो period है, उस time भी there was large swath of open terrestrial land. Yeah, in short, large swath of open land. अब it is not difficult to understand that अगर आपके सामने बिल्कुल ओपन स्पेस है, जहाँ तक आपकी नज़र जाए अप टू द होराइजन, फिर उसमें टू सर्वाइव द प्रेडेशन you must walk fast or you must run fast. You must traverse the distance in a way that you can outcompete your predators. So उसके लिए जो quadrupedal model है, which means to walk on four, it was not efficient. And this thing, it gradually gave way to bipedal locomotion because the characteristic it was favored in. बहुत सारे primates हैं, they were bipedal. Habitual bipedal mean कभी कभी they walk on two, especially while carrying the offspring, while carrying any stone or tool. So this habitual bipedalism, this characteristic it was favored in, and gradually this particular trait it evolved into bipedal locomotion. So ये हम देख सकते हैं कि जो होमो सेपियंस की कैरेक्टरिस्टिक हैं, all the biological characteristics by which we are known, by the complex brain, the evolved neocortex, uh, where the reduction of jaw, reduction of bodily hair, reduction of canine muscle, क्या बोल सकते हैं, टेल, जितने भी मॉडर्न कैरेक्टरिस्टिक हैं उनकी कंपैरिजन में व्हेन वी कंपेयर ऑस्ट्रेलोपिथेसिस, सो दे आर मैनी डिफरेंसेस, बट स्टिल ऑस्ट्रेलोपिथेसिस they develop the ability to walk on two. So this characteristic it evolved independently because of those environmental pressure. That's what I mean. Mosaic evolution, it explains how key human traits, bipedalism, encephalization means brain expansion, dentition, tool making, cultural complexity, all of them they developed asynchronously rather than simultaneously. The meaning is all of these characteristics by which modern Homo sapiens is known, all of them they develop independently and asynchronously, means in different type. They develop in transition, not uniformly. So this phenomena is evident across different hominin species where transitional fossils they exhibit a mixture of primitive and derived traits. So आज जो भी हमारे Homo sapiens के traits हैं, they developed out in a piecemeal manner. किसी species में dentition reduce हुआ, then some species they had bipedal locomotion, some species they had enhanced cognitive abilities, enhanced encephalization. So धीरे धीरे इन सब जो piecemeal manner में जो evolution हुआ, that was because of every transitional species it exhibited a mixture of ancestral and then the derived traits. And this phenomena is not exclusive to humans. Also और भी species हैं such as mammals, reptiles, amphibian, invertebrates, all of them they demonstrate how different evolutionary pressures they shape specific traits at different rates. Now let's have a look at theoretical framework, definition and principle. So mosaic evolution is a pattern of evolution where different biological traits they develop at different rates within a species, and it acts as a direct challenge to orthogenetic model. Orthogenetic here means the traditional model, which assume a uniform and continuous transformation of species. So they believe that species in the earlier time they transform themselves from one phase to another, and all of their biological and anatomical characteristic, they also evolved in the same manner. However, mosaic evolution, it aligns with the modern synthesis of evolutionary theory, the modern theory, which incorporate Darwinian natural selection, Mendelian genetics, and population biology. Now, the key principle of mosaic evolution, which are very important from the perspective of UPSC examination. The first principle, it is non-linear development, which is that evolution, it is in a non-uniform manner. Traits will evolve at different speeds, leading to transitional species, and all those species with a combination of ancestral and derived characteristic. And ये बात it हमारे ऊपर भी लागू होती है on Homo sapiens कि हमारे अंदर भी जो characteristic है, some of them they are ancestral and some are derived characteristic. Then the second principle, functional independence, which means different anatomical and behavioral traits they evolve at distinct selective pressures. So ये एग्जाम्पल दे रखा है जो आपको समझाया भी है that Australopithecus they evolved bipedalism long before we have had any taste of brain expansion. क्योंकि Australopithecus का brain अगर देखें it was somewhere around 400 to 500 cubic centimeter, which is just a few notch above that of primates, but still they had evolved bipedalism. Now the third principle, transitional forms and evolutionary overlaps. So many transitional fossils or many intermediate species, they exhibit the mix of ancestral and derived features. So it can be seen in Australopithecus sediba, which share traits with both Australopithecus and Homo. So ये एक transitional fossil है, transitional species है, which share or which combine the features of both Australopithecus and Homo sapiens. Now let's take a look at the key example of mosaic evolution in hominins. So hominins and hominids both are different terms. The distinction lies in that hominin species are all those species that look like modern humans, or those species that have some surviving characteristic of modern Homo sapiens. So ये जो है इस स्टॉक में it includes Australopithecus, क्योंकि right now Homo sapiens they can walk on two. We are bipedal. So all those species that develop bipedalism, they are included in hominin stock. Those are Australopithecus, Homo habilis, Homo erectus, और फिर जितने भी आके एक Homo sapiens हैं वो सब. Then hominids वो हैं that all those species with which we have a distant relationship. So इसके अंदर apes भी आ जाते हैं. Apes, then all these species of hominins. Now, so first example, bipedalism and skeletal adaptation. So one of the earliest defining traits of hominins, ये यहाँ पे इस चीज़ का explanation आ गया that hominins they have some defining traits. Most of the traits which are present in modern Homo sapiens, and we take them as the parameter to define hominins, and one of the earliest traits was bipedal locomotion. So this bipedal locomotion, it occurred in a stepwise manner. So the early hominins such as Sahelanthropus chadensis and Oronin tugensis, और थर्ड एग्जाम्पल Ardipithecus ramidus, ये तीनों जो सब स्पीशीज हैं, all three are subspecies of primate stock, yet all of them they exhibited early bipedal adaptation, but yet they retain arboreal features. Meaning of which is कि इन तीनों species में they were adaptations regarding bipedal locomotion, pelvis adaptation, skeletal adaptation, but yet they retained the arboreal features, which means that they had longer limbs. compared to other species, क्योंकि arboreal lifestyle हैं, which means to live on trees. So अगर arboreal lifestyle हैं तो limb structure जो हैं वो will correspond with it. Then second example, Australopithecus afarensis. It had a pelvis and knee structure that was suited for bipedalism, yet it retained long curved finger for tree climbing. Again, for arboreal lifestyle. That is Australopithecus subspecies maybe there were modifications, adaptations regarding bipedalism, yet it had longer hands, and curved finger that were needed for arboreal lifestyle. Then the third example, Homo erectus, that it developed a fully modern postcranial skeletal that was suited for endurance running and long distance walking. सो यहाँ पे थर्ड एग्जाम्पल ये भी आप दे सकते हैं कि बाइपेडलिज्म को लेकर दैट होमो इरेक्टस एज द नेम सजेस्ट इट स्टैंड फॉर the Homo species, the hominin that stood on two, that completely stood on two, and it developed the postcranial skeletal that was needed for endurance running and long distance walking, and yet it was way different from Homo sapiens. Then the litholy footprints were discovered by Mary Leakey. They provide a direct evidence of habitual bipedalism in Australopithecus afarensis. So habitual bipedalism, यहाँ पे I would like to highlight how the natural selection works. So जब natural selection के video upload किए थे, then I talk about a few conditions on which natural selection act, and first of which is variety or variations. Natural selection will act only when there are variations and variety in a particular species. So अगर हम सारे hominids की बात करते हैं, सारे hominins की बात करते हैं, तो उनके अंदर how we came to evolve bipedalism, it must have a precedent in the earlier species, in the ancestral species. So this habitual bipedalism, it was one of those precedents, one of those varieties upon which natural selection acted. In other words, let's say यही होमो सेपियंस होमिनिन्स की 3-4 स्पीशीज हैं. फर्स्ट ऑस्ट्रेलोपिथेकस फेरेंसिस, फिर हम बात करते हैं पैरांथ्रोपोस रोबस्टस सेकंड, फिर हम बात करते हैं टुगेनेंसिस की, फिर एक और आर्कैइक होमो सेपियंस ले लेते हैं दैट वेंट एक्सटिंक्ट. अब इन ये 4 स्पीशीज हैं दैट आर को एग्जिस्टिंग. Now, natural selection, which in another word can be called the environmental pressure. So, ये सारी species हैं, they were coexisting contemporarily, especially during time when the atmosphere it was gradually into the warm phase, और उसकी वजह से we have the condition of open grasslands. अब यहाँ पे to avoid predation you need to walk fast, you need to cover a long distance in a short amount of time. और फिर उसमें the natural selection it favored those species that had a precedent, a characteristic of habitual bipedalism. So in that way those habitual bipedalism, those characteristics they were favored in on, and then those characteristic they survive in their offspring, and further this survival of offspring with the required characteristic it led to evolution of species that were walking completely on two. So this habitual bipedalism it gave way to complete bipedalism in Australopithecines. Now the brain expansion and cognitive development. So the increase in brain size and encephalization it occurred at different pace compared to bipedalism. So यहाँ पे देख सकते हैं कि encephalization it was going through a different speed, and bipedalism it had its own pace. So Australopithecines they had a very small brain size, 400 to 500 cc, and but despite it they were fully bipedal. Then Homo habilis, There was a slight increase in encephalization, 600 to 750 cubic centimeter. This moderate brain expansion, it was associated with rudimentary tool making. So again, you can see the play of environmental pressure, because the environment needed that those species with certain brain structure that can make tools that can modify their approximate environment. And this modification, this exploitation of environment, it helped the Homo habilis to survive that time, and that's how they came to evolve into Homo erectus. Now, Homo erectus, their brain expansion 900 to 1100 cc, it was significant increase in brain size, and with it, they occurred complex tool use and social behavior. Again, the play of environmental pressure, the play of selective pressure, because at that time, uh, during द फुल डिस्प्ले ऑफ इंटरग्लेशियल पीरियड, क्योंकि हम अभी भी एक ऐसे ही इंटरग्लेशियल पीरियड में हैं, एंड बिकॉज ऑफ दैट ओपन ग्रासलैंड दे ग्रेजुअली गिव वे टू लार्ज वेजिटेशन. वेजिटेशन के साथ ही हर्बीवोरस आए, हर्बीवोर्स के साथ ही कार्निवोर्स आए. सो predation, it increased up to manifold, and to avoid that predation we needed complex tool use so that we can survive that time. We can exploit the environment in a way that the survival of whole species can be ensured. And this survival, it dependent on not only complex tool use but social behavior as well. And both these phenomena, they were related to cognitive development, related to increase in brain size. Now this encephalization finally culminated in modern Homo sapiens with a cranial capacity of 1350 cubic centimeter, which is a rapid cognitive advancement, and that includes symbolic thought, language, and culture. And one more thing, you must keep this in mind that Homo sapiens, we are a favored stock from the kingdom that we belong to, the animal kingdom and the family primates. So our species, it has survived. Our species, including the subfamily that we belong to, hominin, it has survived because of presence of variations and presence of suitable characteristic. So those characteristics, they were favored in, and the favoring in, it led to successful reproduction. It led to transmission of better characteristic down the line, and which led to further favoring in. And this is how we came to evolve an admixture of both ancestral and adaptive characteristic. So यहाँ पे जो rapid cognitive advancement है, symbolic thought, language, culture, they are there just because the nature demands it. The natural selection, the selective pressure, whichever name you call it, they demand it. That's why we are here. Otherwise, if the time have been different, and if the demands of the time have been different, we wouldn't have been here. क्योंकि एक टाइम था जब डायनासोर्स भी थे, and the mammals to which we belong to, we were very small in size. Yet the time they got changed, newer situations came, newer selective pressures came, and in the present time, Homo sapiens, they have come to survive that longer time just because we have been working hard to prove ourselves. We have been working our ways to survive against the brutal claws of nature. Now, the next example, the discovery of Homo naledi in South Africa with a small brain, yet it exhibited sophisticated burial behavior. Now, this is again an example of transitional fossil that this hominin species, it had a very small brain, 500 cc, yet it displayed burial behavior, which is typical of higher cognitive ability. So This challenges the assumption that intelligence and brain size they evolve simultaneously. Now, third example, dental and craniofacial changes. So, evolution of dentition it further highlights mosaic evolution. Australopithecus, they had large molars and thick enamel, which indicates a plant-based diet, whereas in Homo habilis, the molar size it got reduced, which suggested dietary diversification. And dietary diversification was again, uh, you can say, oh, one of our handy tool against the selective pressure that help in survival of our hominin stock. Then Homo erectus, the teeth structure they further reduced, which was linked to cooking and increased meat consumption. And now Homo sapiens, they have lightened jaws and smaller teeth, which indicates advanced food processing. So you can see here from Australopithecus, which had large molars, and even when we go further back in and look at the primate stock, so most of the primates, especially the baboons, you can see large canines as well that resemble the canines of other carnivores. So this transition from large canine, large molar to lighten and the modern teeth structure, modern dentition, it again highlight how mosaic evolution it helped in evolution of the present dentition. So this gradual reduction in jaw size over time it reflects changing dietary habits rather than single evolutionary shift. So ऐसा नहीं है कि जस्ट एक स्पीशीज से दूसरी में ट्रांजिशन होते ही जो टेथ स्ट्रक्चर है पूरा चेंज हो गया. The early species it had large canine, and then we have the modern teeth structure with simple teeth and a pattern of 2 1 2 3. So again बात वही है कि it was not a uniform transition. Then the fourth example, tool use and cultural evolution. So cultural advancement it did not align with anatomical changes. मतलब ये है कि cultural practices they evolve in an independent manner, and जो physiological changes हैं they do not imply that culture will evolve simultaneously. तो यहाँ पे जो example है Homo naledi वाला, ये भी आप देख सकते हैं कि brain size small है yet complex burial behavior, which is an indication of higher or complex cognition. So यहाँ पे first older one tools, Homo habilis they produce simple stone tools despite retaining some primitive skeletal traits. So Homo habilis की बात करते हैं. Homo habilis means the handyman, the first species of hominin stock that started making tools. So yet Homo habilis was not a complete bipedal or complete erect hominin. So यहाँ पे tool use भी है, but yet complete bipedalism and complete erect posture both are absent. Second, the Acheulean industry है. Homo erectus they created bifacial hand axes which signaled cognitive improvement, yet they were far away from the cranial capacity of modern humans. Then the Mousterian tools, यहाँ पे Neanderthals हैं, they demonstrated complex tool making despite sharing archaic features. So Neanderthals वो भी they look similar to Homo erectus, yet उनकी टूल मेकिंग है या ओवरऑल कल्चर की बात करते हैं, टूल मेकिंग के अलावा बरियल भी है, आर्टिफैक्ट्स भी मिले हैं. तो उनके व्हेन वी लुक both these things, both these advancement side by side, so we can see here that culture जो है cultural traits हैं वो अलग develop हो रहे हैं, yet the species that are undertaking those cultural advancement they are also holding or exhibiting some archaic features. Now the Upper Paleolithic Revolution, in which symbolic artifacts, cave painting, advanced tool, they mark the emergence of modern behavior in Homo sapiens. So यहाँ पे ये ग्रेजुअल इवोल्यूशन देख सकते हैं कि जो कल्चरल एडवांसमेंट है इट वाज नॉट अ मैटर ऑफ ओवरनाइट, अ मैटर ऑफ ट्रांजिशन ओवरनाइट. So again, this pattern indicates that cultural evolution did not occur synchronously with anatomical evolution. Brain evolution, anatomical evolution means the evolution of dentition, craniofacial changes, um, osteoskeletal changes, encephalization. बहुत ये जो जितने भी anatomical evolution है वो अलग हो रहे हैं, but cultural evolution है it was taking another side. It was going on its own pace. Now let's take example of other species. So first, horses, which and now we are talking about evolution of limb structure and size. So evolution of horses, equidae, it exemplifies mosaic evolution via changes in body size, limb structure, and dentition. The first, Eohippus, it was a small fox-sized ancestor with multiple toes and simple teeth, which was adapted for browsing. Next step in evolutionary ladder was Mesohippus, with increased body size, reduction in toes, and more complex teeth for grazing. Next stage in this hierarchy was Merychippus, which shifted to open grasslands, leading further to limb elongation and reduction to 3 toes. Finally, Equus, a fully modern horse with a single hoof and high crowned teeth that is adapted for grazing lifestyle. So ये modern human, इसका evolution आप देख सकते हैं from a small fox-sized ancestor to fully modern horse. Now the second example, whales that transition from land to water. So the evolution of modern whales, cetacea, from terrestrial ancestor, it provide excellent example. First, Pachycetus, a terrestrial carnivore with some adaptation for swimming. The second in step was Ambulocetus, a small semi-aquatic species with a strong limb for swimming but still capable of walking on land. So यहाँ पे जो amphibian characteristic है, you can see how they evolved. Then third, Basilosaurus, a fully aquatic and with reduced hind limbs, elongated body and a tail adapted for propulsion. So यहाँ पे amphibian characteristic आप देख सकते हैं कैसे develop हो रहे हैं from a terrestrial organism. And finally, modern whales, complete loss of hind limbs, development of echolocation and extensive physiological changes for deep diving. So यहाँ पे ये जो चीज़ है, when amphibian characteristic develop from Ambulocetus to Basilosaurus, यहाँ पे ये देख सकते हैं कि they walked on land but they were also capable of swimming. But to survive an aquatic lifestyle, hind limbs, which you can compare with our legs, so hind limbs, they needed to be reduced. So that's how this reduction, it can give way to any structure, any tail that will be helpful in a marine or aquatic lifestyle. So this evolution of tail, which was for propulsion. So propulsion is पानी के अंदर, in water, if any marine organism, if any aquatic organism, it needs to push through. So density of water, it is different from the density in which terrestrial organisms survive. So the medium in which we live in, the medium of air, it has a far less density than that of liquid. So to push through the liquid molecules, you need propulsion. Just like आप जो भी आपकी ऑटोमोबाइल हैं, स्पेशली 4-व्हीलर्स, उनके अंदर प्रोपल्शन जो है पीछे वाले एक्सल से आता है, और नीचे आप चेसिस के अंदर आपने एक लॉन्ग शाफ्ट देखी होगी जिसमें पीछे एक्सल से लगा हुआ होता है. So this propulsion, it is throttled by hind wheels. और उसी phenomena से you can see the analogy here that this propulsion, it was needed, and for propulsion you needed an axle, you needed a shaft, and this shaft, this tail, it got developed as a matter of amphibian lifestyle. And finally, to survive completely in aquatic lifestyle, hind lip hind limbs, they were lost, they were eliminated. Then echolocation was developed. Echolocation means that modern whales, they use sound waves to detect their prey, क्योंकि जो लाइफस्टाइल नीड, जो बॉडीली नीड्स हैं, चाहे वो टेरेस्ट्रियल हो, एरियल हो या एक्वेटिक एटमॉस्फेयर हो, वो सिमिलर है. द फर्स्ट वन इज न्यूट्रिशन. सो न्यूट्रिशन मीन्स फूड. तो फूड एंड मेटिंग, इन दोनों के लिए you need to have a medium by which you can distinguish, you can detect them. So echolocation is one of the medium by which the modern whales, they send sound waves into the water body. और यही sound waves जो हैं, when they collide with any object, so its structure, its presence, and its movement, all of them, they get detected by a modern whale. So in that way, they can detect the presence of both food, not just but three: food, mating, and threat. So all the three entities, they get detected via the application of sound waves. जो मॉडर्न शिप्स हैं वो भी इस इकोलोकेशन फंक्शन को यूज़ करती है इन सोनार, साउंड, नेविगेशन एंड रेंजिंग. इसमें टू गेज द डेप्थ or to look for threats, to look for sunken ship, या फिर जो भी किसी एंटिटी को if they are looking for, these sound wave, they help in detecting the entity beneath the water. So होता क्या है, they send the waves, फिर ये waves जो sound waves हैं, when I strike a surface, this distance, इससे पता चल जाता है कि पर्टिकुलर एंटिटी वो है कहाँ पे. And modern whales, they also employ these sound wave. और कैसे करते हैं, I have explained it here. So the gradual adaptation of different anatomical features, limb reduction, change in respiration, and development of echolocation, they demonstrate again mosaic nature of cetacean evolution. Now, third example, birds, dinosaur to avian transition. So birds evolved from theropod dinosaur in a mosaic fashion. So the first one, Archaeopteryx, a transitional form with both reptilian clawed fingers, long bony tails, and aviar features. So ये चीज़ आपको याद रखनी है कि नेचुरल सिलेक्शन, इट एक्ट्स ऑन वेराइटी, प्रेजेंस ऑफ वेराइटी. वेराइटी होगी, हेट्रोजाइगस होगा कोई, तभी उस पर नेचुरल सिलेक्शन एक्ट हो पाएगा. यूनिफॉर्मिटी, if it is there, then it's like a tossing of a coin. या तो ये species completely survive करेगी, या this species will go to extinction. But if diversity is there, then वो diversity, it help in survival of any species. So Archaeopteryx में दोनों features थे, reptilian and avian features, and the avian features, they gradually got selected, and this divergence, it help in survival of one of those characteristics. Otherwise, dinosaurs, they are not there, because the selection pressure, the environmental pressure, they do not need such giant entities. The next is Confuciusornis. It had more advanced flight adaptation but retained primitive skeletal features of theropod dinosaurs than the modern birds. which adapted fully for flight with lightweight skeleton, toothless beak, and advanced respiratory system. So this gradual evolution of feathers before full flight capability is an example of mosaic evolution. And this is again an example of presence of variety which were acted on by environmental pressure to diverge to different species. Now, the recent discussions on mosaic evolution. The first one is advances in genomics. So, whole genome sequencing, they had provided insight into genetic variation that contribute the mosaic nature. So, whole genome sequencing means that whole genotype of any particular species, it is sequenced, it is mapped. So इससे पता चल जाता है कि डीएनए वेरिएशंस कितने हैं, किस में कितना वेरिएशन है, एंड कितने जीन्स जो हैं वो अवेलेबल है, कितने वेरिएशंस हैं अवेलेबल हैं, और उन्हीं वेरिएशन से, उन्हीं जेनेटिक वेरिएशन से वो हमें पता चल जाता है कि यस द इवोल्यूशन इज गोइंग टू टेक विच डायरेक्शन. And the studies on Neanderthal and Denisovan admixture, they also reveal that anatomical traits evolve at different rates in different populations. So Neanderthals and Denisovans, both of are archaic Homo sapiens species. और उनके admixture से, so it was believed that uh, some population of Homo sapiens, they are derived from the intermixing of Denisovans and archaic Homo sapiens genes. In other words, it was believed that both Neanderthals, Denisovans, they met with the populations of modern Homo sapiens, and their genes still survive in some of the population, और वो इस whole genome sequence से ही पता चला है. The second, hominin coexistence and hybridization. So it also discovered that multiple hominin species coexisted and interbred. Yes, यहाँ पे जो Neanderthal, Denisovans का, even Cro-Magnon, Grimaldi, इन सब के बारे में भी ये जो multiple hominin species हैं, including the ancestral one, जितने भी Australopithecus species हम देखते हैं, Paranthropus, Robustus हो गया, Ardipithecus, Ramidus हो गया, Tugenensis हो गया, जितने भी ये species हैं Australopithecus की, Homo habilis की, all of them they coexisted, means existed side by side and interbred with one another, and this challenged simplistic evolutionary models, because अब हमें पता चला है कि yes, the modern stock है Homo sapiens का, उसका जो भी genetic composition है, the genotype है या gene pool है, उसके different constituent characteristic हैं, how we came to derive them. The survival of Homo floresiensis and Homo luzonensis both suggest complex evolutionary trajectories. Again, इसका meaning यही है कि ये archaic Homo sapiens species हैं, जैसे Cro-Magnon है, Grimaldi है, इसी तरह ये भी species हैं, and some of their characteristics they survive in the modern Homo sapiens, which indicate coexistence and interbreeding. Now, the implications for human evolution. So, emerging research they highlight that evolutionary pressures such as climate change, diet, and social structure they shape different traits independently. और वो हमने देखा ये कैसे. And artificial intelligence and machine learning they are being used to model evolutionary pattern, reinforcing the principle of mosaic evolution. Now, notable scholars: Charles Darwin, who proposed gradual evolutionary change and led the foundation of the modern concept. Second, Raymond Dart, who discovered Australopithecus africanus, which demonstrated transitional features. Third, Mary and Louis Leakey discovered Homo habilis and lithoid footprints, providing evidence for early bipedalism. Fourth one, Donald Johanson, who found Lucy, Australopithecus afarensis, which showcase early bipedal traits with primitive upper limbs. So, ये जो Australopithecus में हमने बात की थी कि most of the transitional species they exhibit a mixture of ancestral and derived trait. So, इस species में Australopithecus species में we had a clear exhibition of bipedalism, yet they were adapted to arboreal lifestyle, which indicated which was indicated by their longer upper limbs. क्योंकि upper limbs long हैं तभी वो they can brachiate, which is one of the key feature of arboreal lifestyle. Brachiate means to leap from one branch to another branch, और उसके लिए upper limbs लंबे होने चाहिए. And finally, Stephen J. Gould, who advocated for punctuated equilibrium, reinforcing the idea of staggered evolutionary changes. So, punctuated equilibrium, it is similar to mosaic evolution, and the slight difference is punctuated means the evolution it works in silos. So, mosaic evolution it talks about evolution of different biological and cultural traits in different manner, whereas punctuated equilibrium it talks about equilibrium in silos with breaks in between, and और टॉपिक आएगा उसमें हम देखेंगे. Finally, the conclusion. So, mosaic evolution it provides a powerful framework for understanding evolutionary change across multiple taxa, particularly for hominin evolution. It emphasizes that independent developmental traits rather than a uniform stepwise transformation. And the fossil record, genetic evidence, and developmental biology research all support the view that evolution operates through modular change rather than integrated whole. So, this modular changes means independent manner, non-uniform manner. So in anthropology, recognizing mosaic evolution it helped contextualize the diversity seen in hominin fossil record, which illustrate that human evolution was not a linear but a dynamic and multifaceted approach. So this is it. Thank you very much, and kindly subscribe the channel.